Welcome into the show, everybody. Rockets without Alperen Şengün, who is out with an illness tonight. Just absolutely lay waste to the Phoenix Suns after a first quarter that was a little bit bumpy. Rockets use a Kevin Durant burst on a night where he's historic night for Kevin Durant. He scores 31, his 31,000th point of his career. Rockets win 117-98 over Dillon Brooks, who sure enough was red hot to start the game. And Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green both get their video tributes coming back to Houston. Here with Ben DuBose, the great Ben. You got to follow him at Ben DuBose on Twitter. Ben, this was, like I said, some touchy moments there in the first quarter, but Rockets just used how they are always successful to just blow this team out.
Yeah, second game in a row that didn't start well, and yet it was pretty much over by the midpoint of the third quarter, which is what good teams do. They don't let lesser teams hang around. And the Suns, 13-10, aren't a bad team, but without Devin Booker, without Jalen Green, they're not at their best. And even though the Rockets didn't have Alperen Şengün, when you have Kevin Durant and Amen Thompson, and you're now 15-5, Houston's the better team, and they clearly made that visible tonight. I think the big story was Kevin Durant, who, the 31,000 career points milestone, just the eighth in NBA history to hit that. So kudos to him. But I thought this was a really nice game to see the makeup of the Rockets, and specifically the KD-led Rockets, because early in the game, Dave, they got punched in the mouth. The Suns led by 9 a minute or two into the second quarter. And this felt like a game where I think Dillon had, I believe, 16 in the first quarter. He had 23 for the game, so it speaks to how the Rockets turned it around on the fly. But early on, even though we all knew going in that this was a potential Dillon Brooks revenge game, his homecoming in Houston, at the same time, until the ball is tipped, it's tough to be ready for that level of intensity. And early on, the Rockets without Şengün didn't have one of their usual engines, and they got punched in the mouth. And it's always useful to see how your team responds. And I thought it was really telling. Kevin had a fantastic second quarter, but what stood out to me most, Dave, he checked back in at the 9:48 mark of the second quarter after playing more than 10 and a half minutes in the first quarter on night one of a back-to-back. And I don't know if either will admit to this, but I feel pretty confident that Ime Udoka, A, did not plan on bringing Kevin back that early, and B, would not have done it of his own volition. I think it was a combination of Ime wanting to do it, but also KD saying, hey, I'm ready to go back in, because KD didn't like how that game was going. He takes ownership in this team, and then, as you said, he went on that incredible run in the second quarter, and the game was flipped. And I think that speaks to, even in year 19 at 37 years old, the professionalism that he plays with is just so valuable. I was having a conversation with someone in the front office the other day during the Sacramento game when I had pointed out how hard KD was playing in the second half, even after the game was largely put away. They had a little bit of an underwhelming first half, and I think Ime got into him at halftime. They wanted to make amends, and they did in the second half. And this person's point to me was, KD always cares. There might be some nights where the juice isn't quite there. They all acknowledge that night 2 of the back-to-back in Utah, KD and Şengün to start the game, it wasn't quite where you would like it to be, especially defensively, but they definitely cared. And we saw that in the second half when they fought back from, down 21 to getting within a point. And I think at age 37, in nearly his third decade in the NBA, to have someone who cares that much, Dave, that's just so valuable to, absorb the blows that Dillon Brooks gave them early in the game and want to respond himself. It felt like this was KD's, I know it's a regular season game. I'm not getting crazy here, but it felt like, the Michael Jordan meme of I took that personally. It felt like Kevin Durant on a much smaller scale was doing that tonight after what Dillon Brooks did at the start of this game. And so to have a guy with all of his accomplishments, one of only 8 players in NBA history to break 31,000 career points, year 19, age 37, to take this type of game seriously on night 2 of a back-to-back, to want to play. I looked it up. He played almost 22 minutes in the first half. Now, thankfully, because the Rockets took care of business, he didn't have to play it all in the fourth quarter, so he was only at about 32 for the game. So he should be fine for tomorrow night in Dallas. But I think just the mental makeup of Kevin Durant, it's not saying he's going to go balls to the wall every single night, because some nights the juice might not be there. But the comparison this front office person made to me was actually to Fred VanVleet from the standpoint of the professionalism. Not saying that Kevin and Fred are the same players. Obviously, Kevin is far better. But I think one of the things that people really respect about Fred is just how seriously he takes every game. And even if he's not making shots, you can see how competitive he is, how consistently dialed in. That's pretty rare for guys of that age that are as accomplished as they are in the league. And, the front office person didn't make this comparison to me, but I'll make it. Even when James Harden was several years younger here in Houston, there were games, Dave, where we'd see Harden and the body language just wasn't quite right. And we'd say this wasn't James's game. You never feel that way with Kevin, even now at 37 years old. And I'm so impressed by that to see. We all know how good KD is as a shooter, all three levels, getting to the bucket, the mid-range, the threes, but to see how seriously he takes his craft, the competitive fire, the fact that all of that is still there nearly 3 decades into his time in the NBA. I don't know. To me, it's not a game that individually means all that much in the grand scheme, although it does move you to number 2 in the West. But I just think it says so much about the Rockets' mental makeup and specifically their leader, Kevin Durant.
Yeah, and it's funny. I know you didn't get a chance to see Ime's press conference. He didn't say exactly some of those things. He didn't mention the Dillon head-to-head, but he did say in the first quarter, KD, he didn't like some of the spots, not getting the ball in a couple of instances, and he was disappointed. He was frustrated, and I think it showed in that second quarter. So, yeah, I think your instincts are right on. He just was fantastic in that period. Amen was as well. I think Jabari. We're going to talk a little bit about this sort of magical, which at least in the advanced numbers are showing this magical combination between Jabari, KD, and Adams. It's been outrageously successful so far to start this year. But Durant was awesome. I mean, he just in that second quarter, I don't remember how many he finished exactly with that period. He had at least 16, 20. I can't remember. It was a high number in the second period. He just blew that game open. And they, like you said, their defense today was really good after that first quarter. I mean, overall, it's really fascinating to me because the Rockets hit twice as many threes as the Suns today while taking, and I'm talking about exactly twice as many, while taking exactly half as many threes. I think they were 5 of 36 and the Rockets were 10 of 18. That was, the difference. The defense today was really good. Yes, I saw a few people responding to tweets that the Suns missed open threes. Yes, they did. It wasn't the entire thing. The Rockets had a good defensive game plan. Yet, as always, there are going to be some open threes missed, but 5 of 36 they held them to. And pretty much the second half, the way the Rockets jumped on them out of the locker room as well, this game was pretty much over late third quarter. So go ahead.
And Kevin, for the season now, I looked at his post-game numbers. They just updated over on StatMuse. He's now above 50% shooting. His true shooting is at 62. He's at 39% from 3, at 89% from the free throw line, so almost at 50, 40, 90. He's averaging now over 25 points per game, almost 4 assists per game because he's had 8 in the last 2. The Rockets are at the 20-game mark, and so, it's basically the quarter pole of the season, and they're 15-5, so it doesn't take a genius to do the math and figure out, hey, they're on pace to win 60, which is really good. They have one of the best net ratings in NBA history, so at the team level, everything is going really well. We've talked about that. But Kevin individually, when he had that week break over Thanksgiving, when he left for personal reasons, it just so happened that it came after those 2 bad shooting games that he had against the Cavs and the Nuggets, and because he went more than a week without playing, it's only natural to sort of look at his stats, and they were still very good, don't get me wrong, but the shooting splits, they were like 48% overall, a little bit above 36% from 3, about 60.5, 61 true shooting. Well, now, all of a sudden, give him a couple of games to fatten up on, and this happens over 82 games in the NBA, those numbers look pretty much right in line with what he did in Brooklyn and Phoenix. Again, we're talking 25 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists per game, 50% shooting, almost 40% from 3, almost 90% from the free throw line, 62% true shooting, right on the nose. That's phenomenal production at age 37 and as the tip of the spear scorer. And, you give Alperen Sengun a lot of credit for the season as a whole, but Sengun didn't play tonight, and Kevin was still that efficient, even after a relatively slow start. Like, he missed some shots in the first quarter of the game when I think Dillon was playing especially hard, and then, boy, did it flip in a big way. And I can't say enough good things about the guy. Like, we all know this is one of the greatest players in NBA history, but the one thing you fear with a guy of his age, is this going to be the year that there's any slippage? Well, Dave, we're at the quarter point of the season now, and both in terms of the team results for the Rockets, how it's impacting winning, but also just the individual stats, I don't see any signs of slippage at all. This still looks like an all-NBA level player who we're just fortunate to have as the best player on this basketball team.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a few people mentioning that my mic doesn't sound quite right. I don't know how it sounds to you, Ben, but
sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm checking everything. I'm not sure if I'm missing. Maybe it was just a little bit farther away. Now it's hopefully okay. But Yeah, I mean, KD was he was to me the star of the game. I mean, Amen had the team high 31 points and was incredibly efficient in his own right, 12 of 17. Had a couple of really nice highlight plays. There was that one where he just blew by Dillon Brooks. Another guy was hammered by a screen by Adams, and then he went past, I believe, Gillespie for sort of a double clutch jam on in a transition play. This was not his point guard resume game tonight. Not at all. The assists weren't there necessarily for him, but as far as
The finishing was.
you're about to say on ball attacking, he was fine. I mean, and the funny thing is, we talked about this earlier. His points per possession when he actually is in isolation is really good, best on the team this year, ahead of Durant, ahead of Şengün. Obviously, Şengün and Durant do a little bit more of that, so the volume's a little bit higher for them, but. He's been really good there. So to me, with Amen, terrific showing tonight as far as his efficiency. But I already know that Amen Thompson's going to be a terrific, like base floor role player. That already exists. I'm really fascinated as a Rockets fan and want to see more of the on-ball Amen explored, because I think this is the time where if you do end up having a guy who could be an engine or a primary, he's not Chris Paul. We know that. He's never going to be a Chris Paul level style point guard. But if he could be a guy that you give the ball to in the clutch to make things happen, downhill or creating, you've got to explore that and see that. And on one note, to talk about this, the way this guy works, this is his third year. Last 2 years, he shot 68.4% from the line. He's now over 80%. He was 6 of 6 tonight. This guy works. I know you and I, Ben, we've talked to different people this week. They rave about the way this guy works. They rave about his potential and what he has. You got to give him a little bit more runway on the point guard stuff. He's not that now, but I think you just got to give him more time on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the point guard debates got kicked into overdrive because Mark Spears over at ESPN/Anscape did the article profiling him in as a point guard, and it rubbed a few people the wrong way. Look, one thing I'll say about that, so the Rockets themselves will tell you that they believe in Amen Thompson as a point guard, and they like what he's been doing. Now, some people will inevitably respond, well, what else are they going to say? Okay, that's fair. But I also think that when you dive deeper into some of the critiques that are out there, some of it is simply being deferential to the roster the Rockets have with Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün, which is not analogous to the roster that Fred VanVleet led the last couple of years. Like, I see a lot of criticisms that lead with, well, the Rockets' best offense is when KD and or Şengün initiate. Well, yeah, those are probably 2 top 15 players in the NBA. Of course it is. If Fred VanVleet were here, I don't think you'd see Fred VanVleet or want Fred VanVleet to lead pick and rolls. In fact, I think a lot of people would probably be critical of Fred for dribbling the air out of the ball. Not because I personally believe that, but it's just when you're in sort of that third banana role behind 2 guys as good as Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün, you're a lightning rod for criticism. So the last couple of years, a lot of the sort of steadying things that Fred does that we really liked when the Rockets were trying to sort of get off the ground floor and go from bottom feeder to quasi-contender, I don't know if they'd be quite as beloved on a team that has 2 top 15 players, 2 potential All-NBA guys, and KD and Şengün. So some of, people question, can Amen run a pick and roll? How good is his handle? And he had 3 turnovers in the first quarter. By the way, he had 0 the rest of the game. So he did, to his credit, figure it out as the game moved along. But I do think some of the things that Amen gets sort of criticized for, in some ways, are good awareness. Like, you don't want your point guard to initiate every set when you have Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün out there. Like, if they are that good as scorers and playmakers, why would you not lean into them more? I wouldn't want Fred to come back and all of a sudden start, initiating every set of the offense. No, I'd want to run more through KD and Şengün. And when it's high leverage, go 2-man game with those 2. So some of the critiques, I think, are misguided to begin with because, no, you don't want Amen to be a drop-in with the Fred formula the last 2 years. No, the formula is changed now that you have Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün. And I think maybe we didn't all fully, sort of recalibrate to that until we saw them on the floor. And then the second thing I would point out with Amen, so the shooting does need to improve, and it did tonight. But for the season as a whole, going into tonight, I think he was at like 53% true shooting. Last year, he was slightly above 60. I'll guess tonight maybe it bumps up closer to 54, but it's still down quite a bit. And so that needs to improve somewhat. But it could be that if the decline is more modest, and we'll see what happens, we're just a quarter into the season, I do think there's more value in when he attacks downhill with the ball in his hands. You mentioned the isolation play. It strikes so much fear in the heart of a lot of these defenses. And there have been multiple coaches that have told us in the gatherings at Toyota Center about the rim pressure, a men going downhill, what that does for the defense. Even if the true shooting slips a little bit, what it does for the offense by breaking down those defenses, leading to easy cleanup opportunities for the likes of Şengün and Steven Adams and Jabari Smith Jr. It might be worth it. Now, I'm not saying going from 60 to 53 is worth it. No, the finishing needs to pick back up a little bit. But I don't know. Like, let's say he finishes this year at 57, 58, but he's doing it while being much more aggressive with the ball in his hands and thus collapsing the defense a little bit more than, say, the 60, 60 and a half he had last year when he was largely functioning off ball. That trade-off might be worth it in terms of what it means for the team. So I would just say keep those things in mind. He's certainly not a traditional point guard, but look, at the end of the day, the Rockets are 15-5. They're on a pace to win 60 games. Amen is their point guard for a team that's on a 60-plus win pace in the tough Western Conference, that's played a relatively difficult schedule, that right now has one of the 5 best ratings in NBA history, according to the latest stats that I've seen. Give the guy some grace. Like, at some point, the position of point guard, I talked to Jabari Smith Jr. about this today at Shoot Around Dave. The position of point guard, Jabari made the case, it's the second most difficult in sports behind a quarterback in football. And just like the quarterback in football, it is so tied to wins and losses. And so if your team is succeeding at the level that the Rockets are, second best rating in the league, now second best on both offense and defense. And so kudos to Amen. As the weeks have progressed, he's gotten a lot closer to last year with his defense. Obviously, Josh Okogie, someone in the chat pointed out, Rockets are now 13-1 when Josh Okogie starts, which I think speaks to sort of the combination of Okogie, Amen, and Jabari as defensive stoppers in that starting 5 when all 3 of them are out there together. But then offensively, look, if your team is second best in the league and Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün, I know Şengün didn't play tonight, but for the vast majority of the season he has, are putting together performances the way they have, why would you not be a little deferential? The job of a point guard is to win. The job of a point guard is to understand what's going on and put your team in the best position to succeed. Amen Thompson is doing that this season. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I do think a lot of the criticisms are because it just aesthetically doesn't look the way we think it should look, both within the history of the NBA, the recent history of the Rockets with Fred VanVleet, who's very small. I get that it looks different, but at some point, for a position that's intertwined with team success, how can you deny that he's helping the Rockets win a lot of games?
Yeah, and I can tell you just from, again, talks this week, they're not taking the ball out of his hands anytime soon. I mean, he's not going to have the ball all the time. You've got all these, KD tonight, 8 assists, Şengün leading the team in assists. You're going to have other playmakers on this team, but they are going to explore this. And, if you guys remember, you and I talked about this, Ben, even then in 23 in that draft. We knew that there was like these strong vibes and words about how much they loved Amen Thompson. You have to remember that draft was Wemby and Scoot, and I was in on the Scoot hype as well. I'll be totally honest about that. But then you had Miller, and of course you had Amen Thompson. They loved this dude, and I had somebody tell me, this week, just again off record who that was, but it was just, if we had the number 1 pick, we would have taken Wemby. But we would have hated passing on Amen. That's how much they loved him. They would have taken him at 2. And that's not revisionist history. I think every redraft has him at 2 at this point anyway. But I'm saying that's how they felt at that time. And I know it because we were like, what are they doing? He has, to me, been terrific. There's tremendous upside in this guy. I'm really happy with how he's played. Yeah, the point guard stuff needs to improve, and it's going to, I think. But like I said, they're not taking that ball out of his hands anytime soon.
I'll never forget draft day 23. They put on a remarkable poker face when there were some rumors on draft day that Portland might go with Amen instead of Scoot Henderson, or perhaps Amen instead of Brandon Miller, if those were the 2 on the board. And I was told, there's a clear top 4. We'll be okay. No, they would not have been okay. That was totally, poker facing. They wanted Amen, and thankfully he fell to 4 and it all worked out.
Yeah, and to be clear, I was really excited about Amen, but he felt like a consolation prize to Scoot, and boy, was that wrong. He is anyway. Rockets just scored big time on that one. Jabari tonight, 16 points. I thought he had some really nice drives today. Put the ball on the floor to attack the basket. I want to point this out because I kind of teased it a little bit earlier. When you look at the lineups, the 3-man lineups this year that have at least 150 minutes, this Durant, Adams, Jabari lineup is way up there.
Hmm.
It's like 130 plus. This is before today's game, folks. 130.2 offensive rating, 102.4 defensive rating. Again, maybe it's too early. We're just at 20 games here or so. They seem to have some sort of magical vibe. I mean, Adams has had an impact pretty much whenever he plays. But that thrived tonight. Plus 33 for Amen. He's not in that trio, but plus 29 for KD, plus 29 for Jabari. I think plus 18 for Adams. This is, again, this is not a knock on Şengün. Şengün's been terrific, but this team wins really in a variety of ways. I think there's a lot of players, single players you can take out of this unit, and it's no disrespect to them. They're still going to succeed. It's going to take a 2 or 3 guys pulled for this team to really drop off because they just do so many things and plug in players to fill those gaps.
Yeah, and right now you still don't have Tari Eason or Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, that's the crazy thing. They're doing all of this while relatively shorthanded, and obviously no Fred. And we'll see what happens tomorrow night in Dallas. It's night 2 of a back-to-back for the Rockets. Crazy thing, it's also night 2 of a back-to-back for the Mavs, who are going to be getting in later because they are playing in Oklahoma City tonight. We'll see if they have Anthony Davis available tomorrow. Unfortunately, the Rockets won't have Steven Adams, and Ime said for now the plan is to only play Steven in half of all back-to-backs. The silver lining there, so after these 2 games, the Rockets only have one more back-to-back until January. It's December 20th and 21st at Denver and Sacramento. I think it goes without saying they'll play Steven, assuming he's healthy, in Denver, where against Jokic and Valanciunas, you need the size. The Kings are a terrible team. You should be able to win anyway. And then by the time you get into January, maybe you reevaluate that. But even if you don't, well, by January, you should have at least Tari Eason back and probably Dorian Finney-Smith as well. So the whole, surrounding construct of the team changes. But yeah, I just think you're exactly right. There's so many different ways that this team can win. Amen at plus 33. I don't know if he's the full-blown point guard. I don't know that necessarily matters at this point. He is, if not the engine, one of the engines, and they are really benefiting from that. I think in the modern NBA, it's more engine than point guard that really matters at the end of the day when it comes to driving wins and losses, especially when you get in these half-court playoff situations. And to the question on the screen, will Şengün be back next game? I hope so. He was at shoot-around today, so I don't think whatever illness he has is that bad. It wouldn't surprise me. This is just me guessing, but it wouldn't surprise me if maybe because they knew Steven wouldn't be available in Dallas, if they said, hey, if it's not realistic for you to play 2 games in 24 hours, take this one off, get some fluids, get some rest, and then hopefully you can play tomorrow in Dallas when Steven isn't out there. And even if the Rockets aren't back-to-back again, the Mavs will be as well. So hopefully that sort of evens out a little bit, and the Rockets can keep this thing going.
That's actually a great point. I hadn't even thought of that, Ben, to be honest with you. I think that actually makes sense as you're describing it, because we knew Adams wasn't going to play one of these. He's out tomorrow. Actually, we suspected Adams would play in the Dallas game just because of their bigs. You had Mark Williams back for the Suns, who didn't play in the previous game against Houston, but and Adams did great tonight. I just think that that makes sense the way you're describing it. Knowing Adams is out, you can have Şengün out tonight, get that extra day of rest, play tomorrow. Dallas has improved. I will say that the offensive rating for the game. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Anthony Davis played tonight in Oklahoma City, which sort of surprises me because that's a game that you'd think the Mavs, and they are getting blown out as we're recording this, would lose anyway. So I would have thought they would save AD for home. But as of last weekend, AD wasn't cleared for both ends of a back-to-back. We'll see if the Mavs still have him on that same restriction. But it could be that if AD's unavailable, then that makes Steven a little bit less important to the Rockets. Not unimportant, because obviously Steven's just a fantastic player, as you illustrated. That trio in particular with Steven, KD, and Jabari has been phenomenal this year. But if there's no AD, then the factors that led to sort of that double big being unveiled against the Mavs a year ago aren't quite there. And obviously the Mavs are missing other pieces, including Derek Lively as well.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about this earlier, but Şengün sort of owns Gafford, but really has struggled in games against AD at times. Today's game, 118.2 offensive rating for the Rockets, 100 flat, 100.0 on the defensive rating. So their defensive rating is going to improve. I think they're 2 right now overall on defense. But yeah, all around good game. I do think, like I said, Dallas is much improved, but AD, I was surprised. I'm with you. I thought, you might as well just throw that game in OKC away and feel like your best shot is at home against Houston on Saturday. So if AD's out tomorrow, I think Rockets should have that one. I don't want to say easy because, like I said, Dallas has improved. Nemhard is a rookie playing really well. Cooper Flag starting to come into focus now, really starting to play
Yeah.
well. But Houston should take that game.
And by the way, to bring the pod full circle, we talked about to bring our entire podcast full circle, to go back to when we started these at the beginning of the season, you wondered if the identity was shifting, because earlier this year, the Rockets were top 2 in the league in offense, but defense was middle of the pack. We talked tonight that the defense is now equal to the offense. Both are number 2 in the NBA. And I think this week, the Rockets got punched in the mouth by Dillon Brooks to start this game. But earlier in the week, they lost to Utah in a game that you described as maybe the first time all season that you felt underwhelmed. That even though they fought back, look, they should have never been down 21. And it was the first night you could say the Rockets just didn't have it. Because the earlier losses, you lose very close games on the road to teams like, Detroit, OKC, San Antonio. You sort of tip your hat. Like, it's not that bad of a loss. You're pretty pleased that the Rockets competed, and sometimes they don't go your way. The game in Utah was the one where you say, hey, the intensity wasn't there, the focus, what is this going to lead to? The next 2 games, Dave, they have responded in a big way, and they did it with a defensive identity. They did not allow either the Kings or the Suns to get to 100 points. And in today's NBA, at the pace that games are played at, that speaks volumes to who they are defensively. We talked about the trio of Amen, Jabari, and Josh Okogie in that starting lineup, now 13-1 when Josh is a starter. But I think when they play with this level of defensive intensity, and this is a team that we know the gifts they have offensively with Kevin Durant now, but if they have a top 2 defense and if they can maintain that level of offense even against bad teams, that's when you get, assuming health, potentially a juggernaut, a 60-plus win team, which is what they're on pace to do now. Like, if there was one nitpick you could have had a couple of games ago, hey, they didn't take night 2 back-to-back in Utah that seriously, and they are going to get tested by that again on Saturday in Dallas, so we'll see how they fare. But they have responded. It's not that beating the Kings and the Suns at home is anything to write home about. These are teams that aren't that good, especially the Suns in their currently diminished form without Devin Booker and Jalen Green. But to go out and systematically just take them apart with your defense and to hold them below 100 points, that just speaks to a very well-coached team, one that's very cohesive, that at this point has an identity that is two-way. In contrast to early in the year, this is not just a team that wants to go out and outscore you. This is a team that sort of has that same type of grinded-out ability that they did a year ago, only this time they have Kevin Durant to boot. And I think that's where, it's sort of fitting. Like, it feels like on the night that Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks came back to Houston, the Rockets have finally assumed the identity of last season's team in regards to having that defensive tenacity, that grit, but they also now have the offensive gear, the consistent offensive gear with Kevin Durant that they didn't a year ago. And so perhaps in some ways it's symbolic. The first time that Kevin Durant faces the Suns and the first time that the Rockets see Dillon and Jalen back in Houston, although Jalen didn't play, it feels like this is the Rockets' vision sort of coming to fruition, and this is what, assuming health with the key pieces, they should be for most of this season.
Yep. After tonight, Rockets do fall to 4th in offensive rating, but still, but they're 121.7. Matter of fact, Ben, I'll close on this note. I was looking at the 2017-18 Rockets team, very special team, number 1 in the league that year in offense, 114.1 offensive rating. There are 17 teams in the league this year with a higher offensive rating than that team. That's how the NBA is just constantly evolving and shifting. In this particular year, you've got 4 teams, Denver, New York, now Boston, and Houston with higher than 120 offensive rating. We'll see if that continues. Rockets number 2 in defense. There is a large gap between OKC and Houston and really all the other teams. But Houston is starting to get a little nudge. They're about a 1.5, 2-point lead over Detroit, who's 3rd. So Rockets defense is coming along. It's improving over the last 10, 15 games. And their offense has just been incredible. No matter who you take out of that thing, it's just been phenomenal this year. So Great win. We'll be back tomorrow night. I believe David Weiner, Beamathug, will be here tomorrow night for that one. After it'll be a road game against Dallas. Ben, appreciate you doing this, and everybody for watching. We will see you guys tomorrow.